Hello, and welcome to my in-depth guide to the Ravaged Unconquerable boss encounter in Honkai Star Rail that debuted in version 4.0 as the apocalyptic shadow version of the Savage God, Mad King, Incarnation of Strife boss. I'll be going over attacks, mechanics, some general tips, and characters that may be noteworthy for the fight. I will also attempt to explain its general attack patterns and behaviors based on my observations, but these can be much more tedious and difficult to determine, and in a lot of cases may not even be useful information. Summaries are included, and I'll leave timestamps in the description. As of the time of uploading, this boss is in the Apocalyptic Shadow 4.0 rotation, but this guide will not take into consideration the Universal Ruinous Embers effect, nor the Selectable Finalities Axiom buffs. These effects may affect character selections compared to if the boss is fought without them, and may change in future iterations. Future iterations of the boss encounter may also have different numbers, but are unlikely to change mechanically. If you are watching this for a later iteration, check the comments to see if I've made any additional comments or clarifications. To start with an overview of the boss's attributes, the boss itself consists of two enemies, the Ravaged Unconquerable and the Giver, Master of Legions, Lance of Fury. The two technically share HP, but the latter, which I will henceforth be referring to as the Giver, is not targetable, nor does it have any toughness, so its overall attributes are inconsequential. On the other hand, the Ravaged Unconquerable is weak to fire, ice, lightning, and quantum damage. It has a greater than standard 40% resistance to physical, wind, and imaginary damage, and one toughness bar of 480. During the fight, the Giver will periodically summon 4 the Conquered. These summons are weak to fire, lightning, quantum, and imaginary damage, and have a standard 20% resistance to physical, ice, and wind damage. They have 80 toughness each. Now let's go over War Armor and Glory, the most apparent mechanics of the fight. War Armor is an enemy status effect that, when active, reduces damage taken. War Armor is reduced by attacking while the character has stacks of glory, with the reduction equaling the current amount of glory stacks held by the attacking character. When War Armor on any given enemy is fully depleted, it removes the damage reduction effect, deals additional damage, reduces toughness, delays action, and restores SP. The toughness reduction can break enemies, which will be considered imaginary break. Attacking enemies with destroyed War Armor also deals a small amount of additional damage. Glory, on the other hand, is a status effect obtained by using SP, with the character gaining 1 glory stack per SP consumed. In addition to reducing War Armor stacks more effectively, every stack of glory also increases crit damage by 2%. In Phase 1, enemies will have War Armor that, when destroyed, restores 1 SP. In Phase 2, enemies will have Senti-Refined War Armor, which still restores 1 SP, but also provides 1 glory stack to the attacker when destroyed. The other aspects differ between enemies. Aside from the War Armor and Glory mechanics, in this boss fight SP can exceed the normal limit. On to the enemies. Let's start with the summons, the Conquered. These enemies cannot take any action. When summoned, they each gain 9 stacks of War Armor in Phase 1, and destroying any given Conquered's War Armor will deal 40 toughness damage. In Phase 2, they are summoned each with 15 stacks of Senti-Refined War Armor, and destroying it will deal at least 112 toughness damage. In both phases, when a Conquered is defeated without having first destroyed its War Armor, the attacker will receive the SP and Glory rewards as if they did destroy War Armor. Defeating a Conquered also deals 2% max HP damage to the Ravaged Unconquerable and 40 toughness damage. If the boss is broken from this, it is considered imaginary break. Now for the main boss. I'll start with the Ravaged Unconquerable since the Giver's attack pattern ties in with it. The encounter starts with the Ravaged Unconquerable dealing a small amount of damage and initiating the Glory mechanic. In Phase 1, the Ravaged Unconquerable normally has a limit of 12 stacks of War Armor, always gets an extra action, and its attack patterns operate on a 3-turn rotation. Destroying its War Armor in Phase 1 deals 80 toughness damage and 3% max HP damage, and it restores its War Armor to the limit at the end of its turns. On its first turn, it will use a standard single target attack, followed by a standard AoE attack on its extra action. On its second turn, it uses a 5-hit bounce attack, followed by an enhancement that deals a small amount of AoE damage and increases its War Armor limit to 25, preparing a large attack. On its third turn, it will perform an AoE nuke that evenly distributes damage, followed by a relatively weaker single target attack. This nuke resets everyone's glory stacks to 1. When Phase 2 begins, the boss fully advances and all characters' glory is reduced to 1 stack, though from this point onward it will not reset. The boss also increases its Senti-Refined War Armor stacks to 99, and this only restores back to 99 at the end of its turns if it is already destroyed. It will also lock its toughness bar until its Senti-Refined War Armor is depleted, and doing so will deal 320 toughness damage and 3% max HP damage. The Ravaged Unconquerable still operates on a 3-turn rotation, but it can now take 4 actions per turn. Most of its attacks are also essentially upgraded variations of its Phase 1 attacks if there are any Conquered left on the field with intact Senti-Refined War Armor. If one Conquered has its Senti-Refined War Armor destroyed, the first action in the boss's next turn reverts to its Phase 1 equivalent. If a second Conquered has its Senti-Refined War Armor destroyed, the second action of the boss's next turn downgrades, and so on. The standard single target attack upgrades to a harder hitting version. The AoE attack similarly upgrades to a harder hitting version. The bounce attack upgrades to 10 bounces. And the weaker single target attack upgrades to blast targeting. All upgraded versions of these attacks additionally delay the target. The nuke itself no longer distributes damage, but instead increases its damage multiplier for every intact Senti-Refined War Armor from any Conquered on the field. In the first turn of Phase 2, the boss will use the Phase 1 variations of its attacks, since no Conquered have been summoned yet. Aside from its very first turn in Phase 2, on its first turn in its normal rotation, the Ravaged Unconquerable will use a Blast, Single Target, AoE, and Bounce attack, in that order, provided there are 4 Conquered all with intact Senti-Refined War Armor on the field. Its second turn involves a Blast, Single Target, and Bounce attack, in that order, again, provided there are enough Conquered with intact Senti-Refined War Armor. Its fourth action of this turn deals minor AoE damage, preparing its nuke, and is always the same, regardless of Senti-Refined War Armor on the summons. Its third turn is only the nuke itself. This is technically the Giver's action, as shown in the action order. Now onto the Giver. The Giver only takes action after the Ravaged Unconquerable does. In Phase 1, it takes action after every second turn by the Ravaged Unconquerable, and it will only summon 4 the Conquered. Any remaining Conquered will be replaced with fresh new ones. In Phase 2, the Giver now always has a turn right after the Ravaged Unconquerable, as well as an extra action. After the Ravaged Unconquerable's 4 actions of its first and second turns, it will remove any remaining Conquered on the field and dispel crowd control debuffs on the Ravaged Unconquerable. The extra action always has the Giver summon 4 Conquered. Here's a summary of the more important parts if the previous sections are too long for you or you don't care about all the details. This boss encounter involves the War Armor and Glory mechanics. Any given enemy takes less damage if it has a non-zero amount of War Armor stacks. War Armor can be reduced by attacking with Glory stacks, with 1 stack of War Armor removed per stack of Glory held by the attacker. Holding Glory increases crit damage per stack, and destroying War Armor removes the damage reduction effect, deals additional damage, reduces toughness, delays action, and restores SP. SP can exceed the normal limit. In Phase 1, the Ravaged Unconquerable normally has a War Armor limit of 12 stacks, which restores at the end of its turns, and attacks in a 3-turn rotation, always getting an extra action. The boss increases its War Armor limit to 25 on its second turn for 1 turn, then uses an AoE nuke on its third turn in the rotation, which resets everyone's Glory stacks to 1. Its own War Armor stacks restores to the limit at the end of every turn. The Giver, on the other hand, only takes action after every second turn by the Ravaged Unconquerable, only summoning 4 the Conquered. The Conquered do not attack and have a 9-stack limit of War Armor in Phase 1. In Phase 2, the Ravaged Unconquerable now has a War Armor limit of 99 stacks, but this only resets after being fully destroyed. Glory stacks no longer resets at all. The boss can now act 4 times per turn, and it will use upgraded versions of the Phase 1 attacks that can delay action, though most can still be downgraded by destroying the War Armor of the Conquered. It still uses only an AoE nuke on its third turn of the rotation. The Giver also now summons 4 Conquered every turn, each with 15 stacks of War Armor. If that was still too long, here's an even shorter summary. Use SP to get Glory. Attack with Glory to reduce enemy War Armor. Intact War Armor provides damage reduction. Destroying War Armor does a lot of toughness damage, and defeating Spears does toughness damage to the main boss. The boss can delay actions in the second phase if the summon's War Armors are left intact, and the boss nukes every 3 turns regardless of phase. Now for some general tips. As tempting as it might be to just unga-bunga hard focus the Ravaged Unconquerable, especially for single target characters, remember that the effects from attacking the Conquered are pretty significant. Destroying war armor restores SP, and defeating one entirely deals a good amount of toughness damage to the boss. This is even more relevant in Phase 2, since the boss locks its toughness bar until its center-refined war armor is destroyed. Even after doing so, depending on damage output, it may be more efficient to still target the summons. The 40 toughness damage dealt to the main boss from defeating a summon is equivalent to 2 skill usages for most single target or blast skills. This usually means you'll be able to break the boss in Phase 2 by destroying its center-refined war armor and defeating 3 or 4 conquered. Going off from the previous tip, you may not want to actually destroy the boss's Phase 2 war armor until you are sure you can break its toughness bar before the end of its next turn. If you can't, it'll reset back to 99 stacks and lock its toughness bar again. Yes, destroying it twice will break the boss, but consider if it's faster for your team to wait for the boss's next turn to regenerate its war armor, or if it's faster to destroy it once and defeat 3 or 4 summons. Finally, the character section. Quick disclaimer, I lack a good portion of the characters on my account, so there's a lot that I am unable to personally test and or verify, but I'll go over some that I've used myself, and others I think may be noteworthy, in both good ways and bad ways, based on my observations and understanding of the mechanics. I will also be referring to spiral stats for this section. I'll reiterate that this video was made during the 4.0 rotation, and stats used were updated on April 4th, 2026, with 19,582 accounts sampled. Keep in mind that teams with a low application rate may not be very well representative of its performance. The most clear choices would be anyone who can quickly go through SP reserves to attack, and, as is usually the case for Apocalyptic Shadow, is also on element. As of the time of recording, the 2 premier choices are Sparksy and Archer. Sparksy can use up to 20 SP in one turn and is also primarily blast and AoE damage, so she's extremely efficient at destroying war armor, which leads back to sustaining her SP usage, and defeating the summons altogether. Yaoguang also triggers Aha Instant with her ult, which is even more war armor reduction if it wasn't destroyed already. As a new main DPS, she also just has very competent damage output. The next choice would be Archer. Archer doesn't go through as much SP as Sparksy, only up to 10 per turn, and he has to build up the glory stacks during his attack sequences, but he gets more actions than Sparksy, thanks to his skill. His follow-up attack is also useful for destroying war armor or finishing off a low HP conquered. Qingtre. Qingtre is a weird one here. Yes, she is able to quickly go through SP, but first of all, doing so does not increase her damage anywhere near to the same degree as Sparksy or Archer. Second, she does not have full control over when to use more SP. When she obtains 4 of the same tile, she is locked out from using more SP until her next turn. This means that if you get, quote, lucky with her tile flips, you aren't actually lucky since her skill and A4 trace increases her damage the more she draws. You would also just be missing out on glory stacks. To compound this further, her E4 gives her a chance to get a follow-up attack after her basic attack when she draws, so the fewer times she uses her skill, the fewer chances of getting that follow-up attack. The main thing you actually have control over is when to use her ultimate. You typically want to use it after she's already obtained 4 of the same tile. The boss is definitely doable with her. Her one team that was shown in Spiral Stats to clear, which I used in my 4.0 clear video, does average greater than 3300. It's just extremely RNG dependent. The last character as of recording that is very SP unfriendly is Danheng Imbibitor Lune. He uses a lot of SP, but 3 SP per turn is a lot only under normal circumstances, not in this boss fight. He's also off element, so breaking the boss is essentially tied to his ability to defeat the summons, but as a 1.x DPS, his raw damage output simply does not hold up, especially since the boss has a 40% resistance to mismatched elements instead of the usual 20%. Aside from Sparksy, Archer, and Qingtre, nobody else really interacts with the war armor and glory mechanics to a significant degree. It's a very obvious SP shill. At this point, besides being on element, the other main thing is to have a team that has a lot of multi-target attacks to help compensate for the low glory stack generation. For example, Finan performs poorly because, like most other characters, he doesn't generate glory fast enough. Sure, other teams can clear despite sharing this issue, but it's even worse with Finan. He cannot rely on his team to help destroy war armor, and he doesn't even use SP during his ultimate, so he has to deal with the damage reduction war armor provides a significant portion of the time. To make matters worse, he has to deal with a boss and summons that has 40% resistance to physical damage. Casteress, despite not using SP herself, does not have to deal with that 40% resistance, and Hyacine helps a lot in destroying war armor. Taking Sparksy, Archer, and an Axe up, who can just do things, off the filter and spiral stats has the next best performing team, Premium Mono Remembrance, averaging over 300 points less, and Mono Remembrance has historically just been the uncontested overall strongest team. And that will be it for my in-depth guide on the Ravaged Unconquerable Apocalyptic Shadow boss. If you've got any questions, feedback, or suggestions, consider leaving them down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, found it helpful, and or enjoy my other content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.